And for many film fans of all ages, the legendary figure created by Boris Karloff is indeed still very much alive. It is 20 years now since he died, and most of his 150 films are still being shown all over the world. It is 60 years since the release of the classic Frankenstein film, which made Boris Karloff an international star. I personally had the great good fortune to know Boris quite well, and I was able, it sounds like a bit of a cliche, but it's nonetheless true, to get to know the man behind the mask, the man behind the legend. I think that in this documentary we shall probably surprise you with a great number of facts which lie behind Boris's long life and long career, which have never been revealed before. Of course, the full range of his work was by no means remotely confined to the playing of one particular character, or indeed in one particular kind of film. He was an actor of enormous range, enormous power, which is so important these days. As Chekhov himself said, gunpowder. Very few of our actors possess that these days, but Boris certainly had it.
He was genuinely interested in his fellow man and concerned for the well-being of his fellow actors. He never complained about the arduous task that the making of Frankenstein was. It took something like 5 hours to put the makeup on and 3 hours to get it off, and the numbers of hours that they would work, or that he would have to sit around in that makeup for on the set and wait for a night shot to be taken, having had the makeup put on at 5 a.m. that morning. He never ever groused or grumbled about working conditions or about his health, or I never heard him say an unkind word about another human being.
But all through the Frankenstein years, which I didn't really know him at that time, but always children, always the fan mail, always saw through the character and saw him as a very loving, caring person, and they had compassion always for the monster. Well, I only saw it, just shortly before he died. I had never seen it. So I've only seen it once. I'm not really an expert on it.
I was born in 1938, so his films that he did in the early 30s, the classic films, were made before I was born and no longer being shown during the 40s in most movie theaters. So my first encounter with the original Frankenstein film was on television. It was played in its entirety. So many, many, many of his films I've not seen in the movie houses. I've seen them on television or on video. But I think he made 167 films. And I've only seen about 6 of them because I don't like scary movies. I've seen things like the old Dark House. I saw the remake of The Raven, which was lots of fun. I visited him on the set of that, and Peter Lorre and Vincent Price and my father had a wonderful time doing that film. So that was fun to see.
Boris worked with Jack Nicholson, and of course it was only in 2 pretty low-budget Roger Corman
Yes,
pictures.
it was, but funnily enough, I don't remember a lot about a lot of these films, but I do remember him coming home that day and saying, there's a boy in this film that's really going to go far. Now, I didn't pay any attention at the time, but it was a very good prophecy.
Well, I'd probably set the stage here a little bit and say that the year is approximately 1966. Mm-hmm. I was doing a television series called The Girl from U.N.C.L.E., which was an enormous responsibility for me at a very young age, and the threat coming down from the network was very heavy because they used to say, now don't be nervous, but you have millions of dollars riding on your head. So the day came when we were handed a script called The Mother Muffin Affair. And how it was possible for them to have cast this gentleman, I don't know. But I walked into makeup one morning, and I saw this old woman sitting in a chair. And she turned around, and there was Boris Karloff, who said, "This is the first time I've ever appeared as a woman." You know, that amazing voice of his. And of course, he melted me and everybody else around him.
But I think he had to fend for himself, really, and follow his own wishes. And he just knew he always wanted to be an actor, which was strange in a way for such a retiring man. But anyway, he achieved his goal, which was wonderful. Well, I think it is interesting that, I mean, as an actor, as mostly as an out-of-work actor, till he was able to get into one play, which played in Los Angeles, and which the talent scout noticed his performance. So they had him go out to Universal to test, and he was thrilled about that and had no idea what it would be for. So he was rather cast down when he found it was to be this monster, but he was only too thrilled to have the job. Bela Lugosi had already turned it down, and I think one or two other people. But after that, he realized how lucky an actor is to be typecast, because there are 40 good-looking actors for every part. But if you get typed for a certain strange part, you know, then the market is much better for you.
And I was probably the most expensive birthday present my father ever got. We shared the same birthday, November 23rd, and I was born in Hollywood. We lived up in Coldwater Canyon at that time, and my father was working on a film during the time I was born, but I have a lot of photographs of him as the proud father at the hospital holding the newborn baby, which are nice. But through the years we got to share several birthdays, not all of them, but several.
He was not by any means confined to what are loosely termed horror films, and there's an enormous body of work, silent films, black and white films, and then colour, of course, which Boris was involved in, which doesn't come under any specific heading. I mean, he was equally at home in comedy and in what is known as straight drama, as in melodrama, as indeed the somewhat gruesome films in which he did appear from time to time. And of course, he had a very distinguished career in television, and a very distinguished career in the theatre, and an enormous amount of radio. I don't particularly like the phrase Renaissance man, because it's been used so many times, it's become a cliche, but I think that Boris really was the closest thing that I've known over a great many years to that particular sort of person. I myself, at one time in my life and career, was a singer, and I have appeared in various countries in operatic performances. Imagine my surprise and delight when I first saw Boris singing on the screen, and he had a very good voice indeed, which sounded to me like a trained voice. And of course, he had the opportunity of showing the world in person, not just on the screen, but in front of an audience over a very long period of time, that he did possess a fine singing voice, which he used in the unforgettable show on Broadway of Peter Pan. I need hardly add that he played a part which I have always wanted to play myself very much and have not yet succeeded in doing. He played, of course, who else but Captain Hook.
Yes, he really loved doing Peter Pan. He loved both of the parts. He loved all the children in the company. He loved Jean Arthur. He felt so sorry that because she had a very, very retiring person, she doesn't want to get involved with anything. And during the intermission, Boris used to get a kick out of looking through the curtain, the hole in the curtain, and seeing all the children trying to fly, you know, up and down the aisles and everything. And then an enormous lot of them went back. He always saw all the children that wanted to come. But Jean wouldn't have anybody come back, and he used to tell her how much she was missing, you know, what enormous pleasure she would get from seeing these children. But that didn't appeal to her. But he said it always amused him to see these pretty little girls who would come into the dressing room, and he'd always say to them, "Would you like to try on my hook?" And they would try on the hook and then look in the glass and have these ferocious expressions on their faces and go home very happy.
But it was a wonderful experience to see him in that. It was, he loved doing it. He had great fun working with children, and he did so much with children. He did the Reader's Digest radio programs for children, and he did all the Caedmon recordings of children's stories. And so he loved working with children and doing things back into the industry for children.
When I married Boris, of course I got to know his daughter, who was a very dear little girl, and we have remained good friends ever since. Unfortunately, we live 6,000 miles apart, but we always get to see each other when I go to California.
And I'm sure that he was well aware of the impact that he'd had on children, because he was anything but distant or unapproachable as one might have thought he might be, because we all watched him as kiddies. And I remember his gentleness and his kindness, and he was not well in those days. He had a brace on his leg, and in spite of the pain that he must have been in, considerable pain, he had trouble walking, and he never let anybody know that he was in pain. He never excused anything that he did because of his pain. He was, as I'm sure everybody else has said, a beguilingly lovely man.
For many years, towards the end of his life, Boris was in intense and constant pain. As I think everybody knows, he had great difficulty in walking. He suffered from crippling arthritis, and he had to wear a brace on one of his legs. He also then eventually began to suffer from emphysema, and he had great difficulty in breathing. Now, the last time that I had the joy of working with Boris was in a film called The Curse of the Crimson Altar, and the only reason I did it was because I wanted to be with Boris again in another film before he stopped working. And so the film was made. He was in a wheelchair the entire time, indoors and out, in bad weather, at night. He must have been feeling very ill, but his humor and his gallantry never deserted him. He kept us spellbound with his stories, myself especially, and he was always ready to laugh. And although the man physically was in a very bad way, when the director said action and the camera was turning over, it was like a resurrection.
Oh, he was passionate about cricket, and he played on the Hollywood cricket team in Hollywood with Sir Aubrey Smith and many other people from the British colony in Hollywood at that time. He went to a cricket match every single opportunity he had over here. Last year when we were here, we were fortunate. We were taken to both Lord's and the Oval, And there is a practice net at the Ken Barrington Center in his memory that was donated, and that would please him, I think, as much as anything possibly could, to know that that was there and made possible for the youngsters of that area to use.
Now, Boris, of course, was a great lover of sport. He was a great follower of rugby, and frequently used to talk to me about various teams. In fact, he knew far more about it than I did. But his greatest love, of course, was, typically, as an Englishman, cricket. Boris was at Uppingham. I believe he played for Uppingham. I'm not too sure about that, but I think he did. And I can't recall whether he just kept wicket or whether he was a batsman or a bowler, but he was a distinguished cricketer in his own way, and of course formed a part of the legendary and unforgettable famous Hollywood cricket team, which went on for many, many years before the war and indeed during the war, under the aegis and captaincy of that very formidable and very remarkable actor, the late Sir C. Aubrey Smith. Now, Aubrey Smith, of course, in his own way, was a very eminent and very distinguished cricketer also, but he certainly was an England captain. He also played for Sussex and was known as round-the-corner Smith because of his bowling style. He used to appear from behind the umpire. How a man of 6'4" could disguise himself behind the figure of an umpire, I don't know, but he was known as round-the-corner Smith.
He made an enormous amount of records. You probably know what they all are. I mean, he did a lot of Shakespearean ones. He did Aesop fables. He did Alice in Wonderland. He did all the well-known stories. I mean, he had an enormous record collection. And then, of course, one thing that gave him great joy was the children's radio program that he did for a season in New York, and which won an award. I don't remember what it was called now, but that was very successful and gave him an enormous amount of pleasure.
But naturally, as I had, to a minor extent then, started to play some of the parts which he made so famous, I did ask him questions about characters like the Mummy, characters like the Frankenstein monster, and characters like Dr. Fu Manchu. I did ask him questions about these three characters, Fu Manchu, the Mummy, and the Frankenstein, as it was called in those days, monster. Fu Manchu, well, we both decided that the most uncomfortable and unpleasant part of that was, of course, the makeup which had to be applied to the eyes in order to give what they call the epicanthic fold, which is the fold on the inner eye, which gives you the oriental eye. So we didn't discuss that in any great detail. And I don't think by that time I'd played it anyway, but I had played Chinese. Then we got on to the question of the Mummy. Now, I played that once, and he played it once. We both again decided that the major problem there was the makeup, and indeed the putting on of the clothing, if you can call it that. Yard after yard after yard of bandage and dust, and the patience that you needed as an actor, and indeed the patience that the makeup man needed. The Mummy required Boris to be in the makeup chair, I think, for anything up to, well, come to think of it, I don't think it was the chair. I think the whole point of this is that he kept on saying to me that he had to stand up while all this was done. Perhaps not the makeup on his face, but certainly the entire process of dressing him and making him up as the Mummy took several hours, there's no question about that. And one of the reasons was, he told me there was an effect of some sort in the film that he did where you see the Mummy begin to breathe. And so you see over the area of the heart, the bandages slightly come open or split or crack. So therefore, they mustn't do that, of course, until the moment comes when the Mummy comes back to life. I hope I'm explaining this adequately. And consequently, he had to stand up all the time while these acres of bandage were put round him, and then the makeup was put over them, which required enormous patience and physical stamina. The makeup on the face was also, I think, extremely well done.
And his other passion was gardening. He was an avid gardener. When I was growing up in Los Angeles, we had about 3 acres, I think, in Beverly Hills, actually. And he did massive amounts of gardening himself. And we had a large flagstone patio that he nearly broke his back laying himself. He loved the outdoors. He loved tennis. He loved gardening. He loved animals. At one time on this 3-acre spot, he and my mother had 22 dogs at one time. He and my mother brought back from England the first male Bedlington Terrier to the West Coast, and to this day I have a Bedlington Terrier. He had a pig named Violet. He had turkeys. Every animal imaginable that I'm sure now the Beverly Hills city fathers would just be horrified if one kept pigs and chickens and geese and ducks and dogs and cats and everything imaginable. But he adored animals.
We know that he was on This Is Your Life, and you were involved there. How did he take it?
It was really very, very unfortunate, because Ralph Edwards is a very old friend, and I knew him before I knew my husband. And we saw a great deal of each other. And Boris said to me one day, "Now, promise me you'll never let me go on This Is Your Life." And I said, I suppose I said yes. Well, we were living in California at that time, and Ralph said to me one day, "You know, I really want to tell you this, and it's true that I've said something to Boris, and I have a feeling," I mean, the subjects never did know, but I don't know quite what it was. But anyway, Ralph said that he had had some conversation at one time with Boris where he felt he would be quite happy to go on. So I agreed, I think wrongly. Boris always said I sold him down the river for a gas cooker and a few other things that went with it. I hope that's not true. But anyway, it's very difficult time trying to keep it secret, living with somebody, and we were living in that time at the Chateau Marmont, because we were just temporarily from New York. So I would have to go down in the lobby and take telephone calls and things. And unfortunately, the program had to be put back 2 weeks because somebody on an earlier schedule was ill. So it made it extra difficult. When the evening came for This Is Your Life, my husband was not feeling well, but not ill enough to do anything about. And he had thought we were going to watch the show, and then we were all going out to supper afterwards. So he was sitting at the back of the auditorium, and when Ralph said, "Boris Karloff, This Is Your Life," Boris thought he was being introduced to the audience and took a bow. And of course the look of horror on his face when he found that he was the subject, and I think the look of hatred that he gave me before he stepped on the platform, was something. But he was such a professional that he forgot his illness, and you know, it was a very, very good show indeed.
Tonight, This Is Your Life, Boris Karloff. Sure, Boris. I do mean it. All right, pal, come here. Boris, I think we really put the... Oh, my. This, believe me, is the greatest shocker, I think, of all time. He has been giving shocks all his life.
But he was still smoking heavily all of this time. And after the performance at the party, he really got ill and they had to call a doctor. And at that time, he was told never to smoke another cigarette, which he never did from that moment on. But he asked the doctor if he could smoke a pipe, and the doctor said yes. So he smoked a pipe for several years. And then after that, of course, it got worse, and he got this emphysema.
But he had a marvelous sense of humor and a wonderful, genuine humility about life and the opportunities he had had in life. He had a genuine concern for the well-being of his fellow actors. He was one of the founding members of the Screen Actors Guild, which was a dangerous business at that time. But he came to use, I guess if he ever used his celebrity status, he did so in later years of the Screen Actors Guild in negotiating contracts and benefits through the Guild for up-and-coming actors. One of his last films was Targets with Peter Bogdanovich, and that was just a wonderful film, I thought, and my father liked the film. He enjoyed making it. He had great respect and affection for Peter Bogdanovich, and it was one of my father's favorite films, and it's one of mine also.
And I feel so thrilled to have had the opportunity of just even being in his presence and watching him work, because they don't make those kind of people anymore, and how lucky to have experienced it.
Degree of admiration and adoration that the fans around the world feel for him. The more I learn about him from others, the more I wished I'd known more myself. Because being in a completely unique position with him as his only child, I'm sorry that I don't have more unique memories of that relationship or that position. And that's no one's fault. That's just a function of life.